many other...
Hello and welcome to WION's live broadcast from Paris. I'm Sarah Coates and these are the headlines. Well, the Scottish Government loses a Supreme Court case on referendum for Scottish independence, saying it does not have the power to legislate for second independence referendum. Twin blasts rock Jerusalem, explosions occurring within 30 minutes of each other at bus stops of the city's outskirts, with 3 suspects arrested. A gunman has shot and killed at least 6 people in a Walmart store in the US state of Virginia, with the suspect also dead. The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog meets Russian delegations in Istanbul to discuss safety at the Russian-held nuclear power plant in Ukraine. And Foxconn confirms an outbreak of violence at its vast plant in central China after footage emerged of workers clashing with security personnel in protests at the factory over COVID controls. Well, in the UK, the Supreme Court has delivered a judgment on whether the Scottish Parliament can hold a second independence referendum, with the court ruling that the Scottish Government cannot hold an independence referendum without the UK Government's consent. Well, according to the President of the Supreme Court, the proposed bill does relate to reserved matters, but the court also recognised that the Scotland Act gives the Scottish Parliament limited powers. It has no powers to legislate when matters are reserved to the UK Parliament, which includes the union between Scotland and England. The President going on further to say that if legislation relates to the union or to the Westminster Parliament, then the Scottish Parliament has no power to approve it. But does this mean the question of independence is out of the picture? Well, the UK Government is going to be pleased with the judgment, the Minister in London now expecting one less crisis as they try to dodge the issue quickly, saying they want to focus on other issues such as the cost of living. All right, for more on this, let's go now to the correspondent Alex Izzat joining us live from London. Alex, hello there. Firstly, tell us, what are the reactions we're hearing following this?
Well, not having the second indie ref is, half detrimental to the Scottish public. Some of them were really pushing for it at the beginning of this year. There was a lot of talk about that Nicola Sturgeon had done a really good job throughout COVID, better than Boris Johnson had, and that it was about time that they got to have another vote. It all comes down to the fact that when they first made that first vote, and over half of the people said that they wanted to stay within the United Kingdom, it was before Brexit, and then Brexit happened, and that's why Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP want to push for it to try and get another indie ref, because they don't believe that it was right and fair, because they didn't know that Brexit would happen and all of the fallout that's happened since. Of course, there is a lot of people who say, well, no, you've had your vote and that's is enough now. We've gone through this with Brexit over time and time again. Some people don't want it, some people do want it, but ultimately there was a vote that happened, so they should be allowed to keep those people who said that they didn't want to break away from the United Kingdom. I think, though, that what's going to happen is Nicola Sturgeon is going to push again to try and go forward with this indie ref, because she did seem to get a lot of momentum going up in the last time. But Rishi Sunak now has to tell her yes or no, and it's unlikely that he wants to break apart the union. In fact, it's one of the things he said in the hustings, that he definitely wanted to keep the whole of the United Kingdom together.
All right, thank you very much for the update there. Let's now bring in Corrie Brown. Corrie is a lecturer in comparative politics, joining us live from Belfast. Corrie, we've just had the reaction there from England. What about from you there in Belfast?
It's an interesting dynamic. People in Belfast and people in Northern Ireland are watching Scotland closely. But this result was expected. The Supreme Court was not expected to say, yes, you can go ahead and have an independence referendum. So now the real question is what happens now?
All right. And, could we expect this to come up again?
Absolutely. This is just the start of the conversation that's been going on from 2014 to the present day. There's a clear demand amongst about half of the population for independence, for another referendum. And right now we're at a moment where there's no clear way forward. So Nicola Sturgeon has always said she wants a legal referendum. She wants a referendum that would be recognized as legitimate on the international stage. But at this moment, with the Supreme Court siding with the UK government, saying, no, this isn't within the competencies of the Scottish Parliament to pass legislation, to have a referendum, even if that referendum is consultative, there's not a clear path forward. You may see increases in support for independence, and I suspect in polling over the coming weeks, we might see increases in support for independence. But what do you do with that support if you can't have another referendum? And for the UK government, why would you agree another referendum? You likely wouldn't agree another referendum on the basis of you're a unionist party, you wish to keep the union together. But also you have the Supreme Court on your side. So we seem to be at a moment of impasse.
Certainly. And what about on the street? There's so many real issues these days dividing everybody with the cost of living, spiralling inflation, etc.
Absolutely. So those are the issues that people care about. They care about the economy. They care about the cost of living. They care about NHS waitlists, their access to health and social care. The SNP, the Nationalists, argue that in an independent Scotland, things would be better. Things would improve over time. That you wouldn't have the policies pursued by a Conservative UK government. The Conservative UK government says we're stronger together. We can help people together. But those are the issues that people care about. At the same time, underlying all of that is this unresolved constitutional question. And I think at this moment, we're at a moment where there's not a clear path forward. There are outstanding constitutional questions, which are in some ways a distraction from the very real issues affecting people's everyday lives. The unionist parties, those parties who are anti-Scottish independence, are saying you need to focus on the day job. You need to focus on the real issues affecting people. But the Scottish National Party has their party of government. They are focusing on these issues, but at the same time, there's a significant base within that party that cares about independence more than they care about some of these other issues. Or they argue that independence is a way to address some of these issues.
All right, Corrie, we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for that.
Of a more thoughtful disposition, and yes, I do believe they exist, will, I suspect, know that to be misguided. Indeed, they will have been hoping that the court, as the UK government asked it to do, would have declined to answer the substantive question today. That's because they will understand that this judgment raises profound and deeply uncomfortable questions about the basis and the future of the United Kingdom. Until now, it has been understood and accepted by opponents of independence as well as by its supporters that the UK is a voluntary partnership of nations. The Royal Commission on Scottish Affairs back in 1950 said this: Scotland is a nation and voluntarily entered into the Union as a partner. That sentiment was echoed nearly 60 years later by the Calman Commission, which described the UK as a voluntary union and partnership. And it was reinforced in 2014 by the Smith Commission, which made clear that nothing in its report prevented Scotland becoming an independent country should the people of Scotland so choose. What today's ruling tells us, however, is that the Scotland Act does not, in fact, uphold that long-held understanding of the basis of the relationships that constitute the UK. On the contrary, it shatters that understanding completely. Let's be absolutely blunt. A so-called partnership in which one partner is denied the right to choose a different future, or even to ask itself the question, cannot be described in any way as voluntary or even a partnership at all. So this ruling confirms that the notion of the UK as a voluntary partnership of nations, if it ever was a reality, is no longer a reality. And that exposes a situation that is quite simply unsustainable. I don't often, as all of you know, quote former Tory Prime Ministers, but I will make an exception today. In the words of former Tory Prime Minister John Major, no nation can be held irrevocably in a union against its will. Indeed, perhaps what today's judgment confirms more than anything else is that the only guarantee for Scotland of equality within the British family of nations is through independence. That fact is now clearer than ever before. The immediate question, of course, is what happens now? Obviously, I'm making these remarks just a couple of hours after the court issued its judgment. While the terms and import of the ruling are clear, it will still be important to absorb and consider the full written judgment properly. I think it's safe to predict that this will not be my last word on the matter. However, my initial views, building on what I said in June, are as follows. First of all, it is worth repeating that the court judgment relates to one possible route to Scotland making a choice on independence, a referendum bill in the Scottish Parliament without Westminster agreement.
Moving on, and 3 people have been arrested after 2 back-to-back explosions rocked the city of Jerusalem, with 1 person dead and 22 others injured. Well, Israeli police say at this stage the blasts appear to be motivated by terror. Well, the explosions happening at 2 bus stops near the entrances to Jerusalem, the first in Govt Shaul, the main entrance to Jerusalem, shortly after 7 a.m. during the peak rush hour. Well, around half an hour later, a second explosion rocked Ramot Junction, another entrance to the city. Police are blaming the first blast on a powerful explosive device planted at a bus station, with Israeli army radio saying that the devices were kept in bags with at least one of them containing nails to maximise the damage.
Not an easy morning in terms of number of injuries. We have here an outline of an attack that we have not seen in many years. 2 consecutive attacks. At the moment, we can't tell if it was one terrorist or a squad that split. In any ways, at the moment, Israel's police's main effort is to scan all possibly hazardous areas, whether in bus stations, buses or crowded areas. At the same time, we are efforting to pursue and put our hand on whoever committed this terror attack. Together with all other security forces, we will do all in our power and will reach this squad.
Well, in Gaza, a spokesperson for Palestinian group Hamas has praised the explosions but stopped short of claiming responsibility, while Israel's public security minister is calling the explosions attacks. Meanwhile, the European Union's ambassador to Israel says the incident is horrifying, taking to Twitter to offer condolences. All right, for more on this story, let's bring in Jodie Cohen, our correspondent, live from Jerusalem. Jodie, thank you very much for your time. Firstly, we know a number of people have been arrested. Do we know any more about these people?
Right, we've heard so far that 3 people have been arrested. We don't know too much information, except to say that the police expect that these attacks, this morning, were probably organised by an organised cell. This wasn't done by lone wolf attackers, as we've seen in the terror wave that's been going on since March, with stabbing attacks and shootings and car rammings. Now, I'm at the site of one of the attacks where explosives laden with bolts and with nails were left in a bag unattended this morning at a bus stop Another explosion took place at another entrance to Jerusalem, also at a bus stop 30 minutes later. Where I am now, you can see a lot of people are gathered behind me, a lot of classmates of a 16-year-old student who was killed in the explosion. 22 other people are said to have been wounded and taken to hospital, 3 of whom are thought to be in serious and critical condition. Now, the police are investigating what does appear to be a coordinated attack. They're sweeping the area, looking for suspects. They've asked everyone to be on the lookout, not just in Jerusalem like here, but across the whole country. And we know that Prime Minister Lapid, who is still currently the Prime Minister, is conducting a security assessment as we speak. But just before we came online here, there were vans going around this local area announcing on loudspeakers the funeral that's taking place today of that 16-year-old boy who was killed in one of the attacks this morning.
All right, Jodie Cohen there for us in Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on now, and 2 people have been arrested by the Swedish security forces in Stockholm. The married couple in their 60s are suspected of spying for years for an unnamed country, this according to authorities. But local media is reporting that the couple are from Russia and have moved to Sweden shortly before the year 2000. Well, prosecutors believe that their intelligence gathering had been going on since January 2013. In a statement, the Swedish Security Service said that one of the arrested individuals is suspected of gross unlawful intelligence activities against Sweden and a foreign power. The second person is a suspected accomplice, while the third has been brought in for questioning after a raid in nearby areas of Stockholm. However, the information regarding which country they were spying for or what kind of data they collected has not yet been disclosed. This comes after Swedish prosecutors charged 2 Swedish brothers earlier in November for allegedly spying for Russia's military intelligence service for nearly 10 years. All right, moving on now, and Cristiano Ronaldo's love affair with Manchester United is officially over. Well, the 5-time World Player of the Year will leave the club with immediate effect after his contract was terminated by, quote, unquote, mutual agreement. Well, the announcement was expected after Ronaldo had initiated a war with the club in a television interview last week. And on Tuesday evening, United released a statement confirming his release. The club thanked him for his contribution across 2 spells. However, it did not go on to mention the bombshell interview which had triggered the entire mess. Well, in that interview with a British broadcaster, the 37-year-old lashed out at manager Erik ten Hag, the club's owners as well as teammates. His criticism of ten Hag was particularly damning, saying he had no respect for the Dutchman. He also said he felt betrayed by the club and felt he was being forced out. United had appointed lawyers to explore potential action against the Portugal captain for alleged breach of contract, but their preferred option was to engineer his departure. Now, the interview was the last straw in his already fractured relationship with the club. Ronaldo wanted to leave United in the summer, but was unable to fashion a move away from Old Trafford. He'd already faced disciplinary action for refusing to come on as a substitute against Tottenham Hotspur last month. Well, the contract termination marks a sad end to his career at Old Trafford, where he established himself as one of the best players in the world during his first spell. He returned to the Premier League in the summer of 2021 and finished as the club's top scorer last season. Well, the question now is where he will go next. Ronaldo is now a free agent and can sign for another club in January. His former club, Sporting Lisbon, could be an option, but he'll have to take a significant pay cut. He was reportedly earning around $500,000 per week at United. He'd also been linked with a move to the MLS in the US. Ronaldo is currently with Portugal for the World Cup in Qatar and will lead his national side in their campaign opener against Ghana on Thursday. Well, earlier this week, Ronaldo said he was bulletproof and his rift with Man U would not affect his quest for a maiden World Cup title.
I don't have to worry about what others think. I'm totally convinced this won't have any influence on the Portugal national team. Every player, manager, president and kitman, they all know who I am, what I think. They know me since I was 11 years old. They won't be influenced by what people say or write. The squad is armoured, well and confident. The group is united and keen to win this competition.
Well, two of the biggest clubs in world football are now up for sale. Manchester United's owners, the Glazers, have finally buckled under pressure and announced their intention to sell a significant stake or even the full club, with a sum of $6 billion being touted as a potential figure. Well, the Glazer family took over United for $1.34 billion in 2005, but their reign has been controversial to say the least, with the club still saddled by $500 million of debt going back to that sale. Well, after reports of a sale, United's share price has already risen by 17%, adding $400 million to the club's market capitalisation. Protests have been ongoing against their ownership for almost a decade, with the club without a Premier League title since the retirement of Alex Ferguson in 2013. Well, Cristiano Ronaldo's comments accusing the Glazers of not being interested in the sporting side of the club last week also hit home. The Man U legend's comment that the club had not moved forward since the Ferguson era also reiterated the point made by other league legends like Roy Keane, Gary Neville and Patrice Evra over the last 3 years. Well, the club put out a statement last evening, and this is what Avram and Joel Glazer had to say. Well, the strength of Manchester United rests on the passion and loyalty of a global community of 1.1 billion fans and followers. As we seek to continue building on the club's history of success, the board has authorised a thorough evaluation of strategic alternatives. We will evaluate all options to ensure that we best serve our fans and that Manchester United maximises the significant growth opportunities available to the club today and in the future. Well, the 2022 Forbes list values United at $3.75 billion, but the Glazers want much more. They've hired American investment firm the Rain Corp to oversee the sale, and this is the same group that facilitated the sale of Chelsea in May to Todd Bowley and his consortium for a sum that will end up exceeding the $5 billion mark. Well, Great Britain's richest man, Jim Ratcliffe, is one of the early frontrunners after expressing his interest to buy the club in August. Well, the Glazers didn't bite back then, but the circumstances have now changed and a bidding war for a global brand is now officially on. Well, bitter rivals Liverpool too have been put up for sale by the Fenway Sports Group, who are American just like the Glazers, but unlike the Glazers, FSG have made significant investments in infrastructure and refurbished Anfield as well as the club's training facility. Well, the club have regained their perch as one of the leading lights of the English game and have won 8 major trophies since FSG took over in 2010. Today, thanks for watching. And there are your WION News updates for now. Thanks for watching.
This is great, Arab.